Thanks for listening to the program. I hope you'll support our guests by clicking on the book purchase link in this episode's description. Each purchase helps support local bookstores, and that's always a good thing.
That I was pitching this book idea, and it didn't start off as Paris. It actually started off as taking Rome, and I wanted to start with the Anzio landings. And then I realized that Paris was much more, it was a bigger story. It wasn't just a single spearhead. It was a very sprawling, very kind of epic tale, and I felt like I could take it on after 10 years working with Bill.
An excerpt from today's guest, who's written a book about how patriotic Parisians rose up and helped the Allies take back Paris from the Germans. Author Martin Dugard is here, and I'll speak with him after this break. This is Pointing the Spear. Welcome back. I'm Robert Child. Today's guest is a New York Times #1 best-selling author and co-author of the mega million-selling Killing series with Bill O'Reilly. His latest book is called Taking Paris, The Epic Battle for the City of Lights. It came out yesterday, and Martin Dugard joins us now. Martin, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks very much for having me on.
It's a pleasure, a real pleasure. I want to reference a review before we get underway that struck me. And the review said, "Taking Paris does for Paris during World War II what the splendid and the vile did for London. Martin Dugard knows how to make history read with as much pace as the best fiction." James Patterson. Congratulations, excellent.
Yeah, that's high praise. Jim's a good guy. I appreciate that.
And you wrote a book with him, correct?
I did, and so back in, I can't remember when it was, like 2003 or 2004, maybe later, he came to me about doing something called The Murder of King Tut. And, Jim's books have a rhythm to them, the short chapters, the cliffhanger endings, the kind of the cinematic opening paragraph to everything. And he had never done nonfiction before. So he asked me to, basically because I write history, he asked me to try to do his first nonfiction book, but using the same storytelling methods that he used on his fiction books. Oh. And at the time, I was kind of a purist about history, thinking, we don't want to, history should be slow. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean? Yeah. And but in the process of writing that book, it became kind of a challenge. How do we make this book? I want people to turn the pages. I want people to read history. I want as much detail as possible, but I also want to make sure that people read this the way that they would read any page turner. Right. And so when Bill and I got together to write the first Killing books, that was the model that I used to, the present tense, the short chapters, all those same things. And then I think I took him to a new level with Taking Paris. I mean, at least that was the challenge, and that was what I was trying to do.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask about this new book. It's your first outside the Killing series. What was the catalyst for the book? And I understand this book is starting a new series itself.
It is. At the time that I was pitching this book idea, and it didn't start off as Paris. It actually started off as taking Rome, and I wanted to start with the Anzio landings. And then I realized that Paris was much more, it was a bigger story. It wasn't just a single spearhead. It was a very sprawling, very kind of epic tale, and I felt like I could take it on after 10 years working with Bill. But the reason for the book basically was that the Killing series was over. Bill and I were done. We were going to call it a day at 10 books, and I was halfway through Taking Paris when he called and asked, "Hey, do you want to do one more?" And it looks like we're going to do a couple more after that one too. So it continues.
Excellent. Now, I'll have a question in a minute or two about that, about your 11th book. Now, I know you have a specific approach to researching your books, including Taking Paris. You actually immerse yourself in your research, to understand the characters and their motivations. Tell me a little bit about your research.
It's just very hands-on. I always start by, reading some very authoritative work by somebody like a very deep dive historian, just to have them explain the story to me the way that you would explain it to a child. But then I do the travel. I go to the battlefields, or I go to the museums. I go to the places where it all took place, just to kind of smell the air and see what the ground looks like, and really just get a feel for what took place there. And then I kind of, as I write each chapter, I just go deeper and deeper into each chapter, and it's a fascinating thing, and it can be very frustrating sometimes too, because I love to know every nuance about who I'm writing about or what I'm writing about. So sometimes the work comes quickly, but sometimes that means only writing like 2 sentences in an entire day, because I keep going down the rabbit hole, and one bit of research takes me to another bit of research, and then I'm all over the internet. I'm looking at books, and then I'm making another trip someplace to go look at something for a second time. But it's really, for instance, in one of the books, I think one of the killing books, I did my research in the Houses of Parliament, which was great, and to go into places like that, and to go into these hallowed institutions, and put my hands on the original documents. It makes the history come to life. And in turn, my job, and especially with Taking Paris, is I want to take a story that people think that they know, and I want to spin it. I want to add detail and nuance and subtext that makes them see this story in a brand new way. And I also want to do things like, for instance, there's a chapter in Taking Paris where we're with George Patton and a bunch of armor officers as they're trying to determine the future of American armor. We didn't have much of a tank army before World War II. And it took place at a high school in Alexandria, Louisiana, or was it Lafayette? Now I can't remember. But the funny thing was, as I was writing, I realized that all the books that people had written had used the wrong high school. They had pinpointed it at a different location. Oh. And because it wasn't even open, the high school they were naming wasn't even open in 1940. So as I began learning about the place that actually took place, it's this magnificent high school with Tiffany furnishings and heart of pine floors, and all of that. Just doing that digging and really rooting around to find the true place, it just makes the whole thing just rise up off the page a little bit more.
And that was during the Louisiana maneuvers.
It was, yeah. The first one. There were 2, but it was the first set, which took place in May 1940.
Right. Yeah, those were amazing exercises. Speaking about the Killing series, I know you probably can't single out, your favorite book in the series, but you mentioned, researching in Parliament. What was? Do you remember a book that was the most challenging to write in the series?
Yeah, that was definitely Killing Jesus, just because it's, whenever you take on something like that, you're not just taking on history, trying to write about the historical Jesus, but you have the religious aspect of it too. So you know that people are going to be scrutinizing every single detail just to find that one thing that you did wrong. Yeah. But I would say the one that was the most fun to write was definitely Patton. Just going to places like Fort Driant, which is actually a French military site now, which is off limits, but I managed to kind of sneak in and get inside the facility. And just following the footsteps of the Third Army, which was super cool for a history geek like myself.
Well, I can consider myself a history geek as well. Now, when you started the Killing series so many years ago, not too many, with Bill, did you imagine it would be as successful as it is today?
No, it was supposed to be a one-off. What happened was that the publisher Bill had for his political books didn't think he could pull off a history book. And at the time we had the same agent. And so I got a call. I was up in Mammoth Lakes and just doing family vacation. And, my agent said, can you come to be in New York Wednesday for lunch? I want to introduce you to a client who wants to write a history book. That turned out to be Bill. And he'd looked at some other people. Then I got the gig, and we had some time to write it. So I didn't really begin work on it for about 6 more months, just kind of poking around working on another project. But once we got into it, I realized that because we started with Killing Lincoln, and there were a number of books about the assassination. Lincoln is one of the most widely written about individuals in history. So I wanted to find a way to tell the story differently. So that's where I kind of fell back on the James Patterson angle. Let's write this in the present tense. Let's write it at a breakneck pace so that you feel like you're right there. And so, and lo and behold, people liked it. And then about six weeks after it came out, Bill called me and said, "Let's do book 2, Killing Kennedy." And then it just kind of kept rolling like that. And it was super cool. I mean, it was I was trying to grow as a writer, just to find better ways to tell a story, more economical ways, again, to make the story rise above the page. And Bill has a great narrative sense, and the combination of the two of us working together was very complimentary. And I feel like I learned a lot, and I became a better writer just of the process of having a sounding board every time that we worked together.
We'll be back to the conversation after this quick break.
World War II was the most violent and destructive armed conflict in the history of mankind. Thousands of books, films, and memorials have been dedicated to the conflict. Yet one unwritten and unheralded chapter remains. The story of America's World War II glider pilots, spearheading nearly every Allied assault during the war.
Oh, I have the greatest respect and admiration for the guys who sat there in the pilot seat of those gliders.
Because there was such a small group of us and so many men under arms, it made us feel that we were kind of special. Chip on the shoulder, don't fool with us. We're glider pilots.
The largest armed conflict in human history demanded all an individual soldier could possibly muster. And the American glider pilots were among the bravest individual soldiers serving on the Allied lines. While many glider veterans will humbly tell you that they were simply doing their part, they will add that the G on their wings did not stand for glider. It stood for guts.
Silent Wings, the American glider pilots of World War II, narrated by Hal Holbrook and available on Amazon Prime. Now back to my conversation with author Martin Dugard. Writing in present tense is obviously more screenwriting. And I noted in your blog that you're not interested in screenwriting.
Ironically, it's because it's too collaborative. I like collaborating with Bill. He's a great collaborator, but I live in Southern California. LA is an hour north, but I found that I love the nuance of the written word. I love to play with a sentence or a paragraph, and I love to find my voice in there. And I find that when you start working with two other writers or three other writers, or you're getting production notes from a studio executive, you lose that voice and you lose that objectivity and that ability to tell a story in a very pure and simple way. Right. And plus, I'm at a point in my life where I like taking that deep dive. I like just being in my office and really digging into the research rather than trying to please somebody who has a different sensibility about a story than I might have.
It's very true. We're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 this weekend, and your 11th book in the Killing series about 9/11, Killing the Killers, the secret war against terrorists, releases in November. What about the entire story of 9/11 surprised or shocked you in your research?
Actually, we skipped 9/11 completely. We go 10 years down the road and we open with the Bin Laden raid and the death of Bin Laden, and then we tell the story of the terror wars for the last 10 years. So since Bin Laden's death, we've had the rise of ISIS with al-Baghdadi. We've had the rise of the Iranian state-sponsored terrorism with Qasem Soleimani, and we tell those stories as well as the hostages and the kidnappings. And to tell you the truth, it's a brutal story. It's riveting. And the research was different than the other books we've done. It's different than anything I have done because a lot of the players are still alive. And so I had the chance to talk to several very prominent individuals who would not go on the record, but who would gladly, tell me about the behind the scenes and the terror wars, and give them the chance to look at the manuscript and make comments or suggestions. And the hard thing about writing this book, which makes the research much different than any other book, is the confidentiality, because first of all, the U.S. government or any of their coalition partners, everything that they do with the terror wars is classified. So they're not going to share that with me. It's not going to be in the newspapers. The classified stuff, some of it I had to kind of stumble across, and some of it I just, had to kind of figure it out from the edges. And then, of course, the terrorists don't want to talk. So you got two groups that don't want to talk about each other and trying to tell their story. And but it was fun. It came out really well. It was a very, very hard book to write. Bill and I are usually very simpatico, and we were kind of a little bit on edge with that book. And I'm not really sure why, but it was a very difficult book to write. But I think the readers will be glad for the effort.
Yeah, I can see how it would be a difficult book, more of a modern story where the nerves are still raw with the story.
Very much so.
Yeah. Getting back to Taking Paris, I mentioned it's the start of a series. What other books are planned in the series so far?
Well, I'm researching book 2. I don't want to put the topic out there because somebody always swoops in and tries to do something, beat you to it. But I've had the blessing of working with Bill all these years, and in knowing that a series does not have to follow a logical progression. I mean, you don't necessarily, like, we went from killing Lincoln to killing Kennedy, and at first that was okay. Those assassinations, those are easy, and then I would get emails all the time from readers saying, "Oh, you need to do killing McKinley and killing Caesar," and people, and then it's really just finding the story rather than finding the logical instant. Killing Jesus, I thought, was a huge departure, and then Pat and we went away from assassination with a bullet to assassination with a vehicle, and it's still controversial. And then we went into Reagan when he had his issues with mental health, and kind of we wove all over the map with our topics. And I feel like I have the liberty, thankfully, because of the Killing series, to do the same thing with the Taking series. And I don't know if we're going to get to 10 books or 11 books with this one, but I sure do like writing it. I mean, it's just, as much as it's a little terrifying to be doing a solo project again after having somebody that I could call and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And we do the back and forth, and we'd fix it, make it better. To wake up in the morning and know that it's all on me. It's a little scary.
I just faced that recently. I just delivered the manuscript for Immortal Valor, which it's about Black Medal of Honor winners in World War II.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And it's coming out it's with Osprey and Bloomsbury. It's coming out in January, but I faced that daunting task of 86,000 words.
Yeah.
Alone.
Exactly. Every morning looking at the word count, saying, how are we going to get there?
Yeah, exactly. And I just kind of pictured myself after a while as a person, like, with a pickaxe, like digging at the mountain, just,
Yeah.
just taking it away.
I gotta tell you, I'm usually a very deadline-driven person, but I don't want to say I struggle with Taking Paris, but I struggled with it because I wanted it to read a certain way. I wanted it to have a certain attitude. I wanted the research to be as in-depth as possible. So I was supposed to deliver November 1st, and I kind of thought they forgot about me. So I got a call about November 15th. It's like, "Hey, that manuscript, anytime soon?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm there." And they said, "We'll take until mid-December." And I called mid-December, and I wasn't telling them, but I was only about 40,000 words in. I was really, it was slow going. And I didn't deliver until almost the end of February. And, but they were very kind about it. Thankfully, I'd send them some pages. They knew that I wasn't screwing around, that I was actually writing every day. But yeah, I felt
It's tough because actually, when you have a deadline, and I had two deadlines, I had a July 20th and an August 20th, and my publisher pushed it up, and they said, could you deliver earlier? And I had been writing, all along, and I was ahead of the schedule I thought I would have, and I said, yes, sure, because they said the problem is that in COVID, all the shipping times are slow, so they needed the book in earlier to put it on a boat to come to America because they're in England.
Yeah.
It's crazy, the behind the scenes publishing industry, what goes on.
I've heard there's getting printers is hard because of COVID too. Finding people to actually print the books.
I think that's part of it.
Paris was supposed to come out the same day as Killing the Killers, and so I kind of, when I found out the day that they were supposed to come out, I didn't like, that's not, to me, that's not an act of synergy. That was, it was the potential for to just go sideways in a big way. And it surprised me. So they basically pulled it from November. They moved the book all the way up to September 7th, which made me really happy, just because, the feeling, once you finish a book, you turn it in and you're waiting for it once you're done, the wait between the time you get it completed and the time it actually is released in the stores can be 6 months. Right. And it's such a long wait, because you want the world to see it and you want them to react and respond, and hopefully it does well. And so I'm glad they moved it up a couple months.
Yeah, it's exciting to have two books coming out at the same time, like you are. That's
that'll be fun.
The book is called Taking Paris, The Epic Battle for the City of Lights. Martin, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed myself.
That's it for this episode. Thanks again for joining me. Next time, my guest will be Tim Gray, founder and president of the World War II Foundation, whose company has produced 28 films for public television on World War II.
And one of the stories I'd always heard over the years was how Elvis got involved to help raise money for the USS Arizona Memorial. So we did a whole film on that, narrated by Jim Nance of CBS and Kyle Chandler. Elvis held a benefit concert at Pearl Harbor that helped bring the momentum back to the project to help get the USS Arizona Memorial built.
That's next time. And stay up to date with all the upcoming guests. Sign up for the Point of the Spear pipeline at robchild.net and follow me on Twitter at robchild. I'm Robert Child, and this has been Point of the Spear.
Music licensed from audioblocks.com. Point of the Spear is produced by RSC Media Group.
I wanted to take a moment to thank our growing army of listener supporter members. You make it possible to continue our mission of bringing you the best military history authors, filmmakers, and movers and shakers. If you're not a member yet, it's easy to join, and it takes just seconds. Scroll down to the bottom of this episode's description and click the support link. You'll come to our anchor page. Click the support button, complete the brief form. It's that easy. We're planning loyalty perks and giveaways to roll out over the coming months for our early supporters who sign on before the end of the year. So don't wait. Become a member today, and thank you for your support.